increase in 2022, according to 70% of our business leaders. The cost of tangible capital expenditures was higher in 2021 compared to 2020, according to 57% of the respondents, and nearly all of these businesses expect the same for this year. 49% of the business leaders saw the cost of their intangible expenditures increase in 2021 compared to 2020, and 60% of them expect the same for this upcoming year. So the survey asked about the overall changes in business conditions for business leaders. 58% of respondents experienced a high amount of change in their overall conditions in 2021 compared to 2020, and slightly more respondents are anticipating a high level of change this year. When asked specifically about the changes in the business conditions of Forsyth County, the results were similar for both 2021 and 2022. For both businesses anticipating increased levels of local business conditions and those anticipating the same amount of change to local business conditions. In conclusion, we asked what the most challenging issue is facing businesses today, and the number one issue stated was labor availability, followed by labor costs from an increase in wages. Despite the challenges noted in these results, the fact that our business community was able to and willing to share their experience just showcases how strong Forsyth County's business community is, and how outstanding communities and economies don't happen by chance. They're built on the foundation of leadership and relationships, and we're all blessed to live in one of the highest performing areas in the nation. Part of the reason that this is the continued investment from you in the business communities and companies in our county. And I'd like to thank the following companies for investing in our program today. Thank you to our bronze sponsor, Smith & Howard, our gold sponsors, Central EMS, Northeast Georgia Health Systems, and Martin Marietta, our breakfast sponsor, Georgia Power, and last but not least, our title sponsor, Providence Bank. And it's now my pleasure to introduce my friend, fellow Rotarian, and incoming board chair, Drew Walker, Forsyth County President of Providence Bank, our title sponsor, for his remarks.
Yeah. Until now we're not friends. Thank you, Derek. As a community bank, Providence Bank values local business and personal relationships. We are dedicated to the local community, its businesses, organizations, and people. Providence Bank is a locally chartered community bank established in 2006 in Alpharetta. In 2019, we combined with two other community banks in South Metro Atlanta and South Georgia to form Heritage Southeast Bank, or HSB. We operate under the local brand of Providence Bank, but have the power of HSB to provide competitive banking services and first-class technology. Providence Bank has two locations, one in Alpharetta, near the corner of Windward Parkway and Highway 9, and our newest location here in Forsyth County at 108 Canton Highway in downtown Cumming. In 2022, we expect VyStar Credit Union to acquire HSB. VyStar Credit Union has a similar philosophy about community service, and we look forward to continued support as they expand into our markets. As a credit union, we will have the ability to offer more products, more services, and remain highly competitive. We look forward to all this while continuing our commitment to our customers and to our communities. I invite you to visit one of our locations or invite you to visit any of our staff here that are here today, and we thank you for allowing us to be a sponsor. Now, let's introduce our first speaker of this morning. In July of 2021, Forsyth County joined the Atlanta Regional Commission, or the ARC. The ARC serves as Metro's Atlanta's regional planning agency and acts as a catalyst for regional progress. ARC is responsible for working with local governments to plan new transportation options, manage water resources, encourage the development of healthy, livable communities, and develop a competitive economy. We are excited to have two members of the Atlanta Regional's Commission team with us today. If you have any questions for our speakers during the speech, please scan the QR code at your tables to submit it. Our virtual attendees can find the link to submit questions in the chat portion of their virtual session. And at the end, we'll have a quick Q&A session towards the end of the program. Our first speaker is Dr. Malika Reed Wilkins. Dr. Wilkins is the Senior Director of the ARC's Center for Strategic Relations. She also heads the agency's Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Program. Dr. Wilkins has more than 25 years in public policy, administration, strategic organizational communications, and building long-standing partnerships in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. She leads the staff in areas of local government affairs, corporate and community engagement, marketing, communications, and public relations. Prior to onboarding with ARC, she served as the state of Georgia in various executive level roles, including State Road and Tollway Authority of Georgia, Regional Transportation Authority of Georgia, Commute Options, the Georgia Department of Human Resources. In addition, she served as Director of Communications and Public Affairs for the Southern States Police Benevolent Association and worked as a consultant for several advertising agencies. Dr. Wilkins is known for her strategic relationship development and consensus building skills across multiple disciplines. She is currently a member of the Buckhead Rotary Club, a commission member for the Georgia Drivers Association, and a board member for Dress Success Atlanta. Wilkins is also a member of Atlanta's Conference of Minority Transportation Officials, the Public Relations Society of America, and past president of WTS Atlanta. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Speech Communications from the University of Georgia, a Master of Public Administration from North Carolina Central University, and a PhD in Public Policy and Administration from Walden University. Dr. Wilkins resides in the city of Atlanta with her husband Anthony and their daughter Malika. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Malika Reed Wilkins.
Oh gosh, I was getting teary-eyed over there. It's like, oh wow. I don't think I've ever heard my bio read to the fullest, so thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Drew. It was awesome. And thank you all for having us here. My colleague and I, you'll see him shortly as well. I want to thank Adam, my fellow Rotarian, all the fellow Rotarians in the house. I'm happy to come and speak at your club. Just put a quarter right in my chair, taking collections, and I'll be there soon. But I also want to give a big shout out to the Forsyth Chamber, James McCoy, Chairman Brooks. You all always do a 5-star event. I was here, I guess it was the fall of last year. I can't remember the exact date. I was here with Commissioner Mills, and we had a fantastic event. It's just always 5 stars. So thank you all so much for having me here. So today, I'm going to get you excited about the future of our region, and then Mike's going to come behind me and tell you the reality. No, just joking. But so I'll move through this fairly quickly because he does have a lot of good data for you to enjoy there. And I think I have a clicker here. Let me make sure. All right. So isn't this a cool slide? What it really shares and shows us is that, you know, there are about 100 metro regions in the U.S. And believe it or not, they make up about 1/10 of the land in the U.S., but 3/4 of the economy, so about 75% of the economy. So when you're thinking about regions and regionalism, of course, Atlanta Metro being one of them, you're a part of that. Really how we plan for the future in our region really sets the stage for the nation. So it's big, it's huge, and we're happy to have Forsyth a part of that equation when we're talking about the Atlanta metro region. And so when you think about companies that decide to move here, whether it's Siemens, whether it's Scientific Games, or et cetera, you know, they're looking at our area from a regional perspective. And so it's important that we do just that. And so I just wanted to share with you the regional piece is really the cusp of the future for our nation. And we also know the importance of regions is because our issues go across county lines. When you think about our natural resources, when you think about our transportation, all of those things cut across county lines for our constituents, for our residents in this region. And so we have a lot to look forward to here in this region with so much growth that has happened. And if we want to be competitive against states and cities like Dallas and DC and Denver, we have to work together, right? And so Michael shares some of that with you as well. So we got to really start acting and performing as a region, as we have. But, when we think about, next steps in terms of where we are in the region, I want to share a little bit about the ARC. And so didn't want to give you too much about this, and I won't go over every single circle here, but I just want you to know we're busy and we do a lot. As you can see, we are the Urban Area Security Initiative, which is Homeland Security. We handle water resources, workforce development, aging services, transportation planning, community development, all of those things, which makes our ARC really one of a kind. There is no other regional commission in the nation like the Atlanta Regional Commission with all of our legal disciplines. So I just wanted to share that with you, and we're so excited again to have Forsyth be a part of that. Here's another way to look at what we do at ARC. No, I won't quiz you on every single brand and logo, but it just gives you a snapshot of the work that we do across these 11 counties. We manage a lot of programs, and some of you have been a part of some of our leadership programs and et cetera. And so I just wanted to share the depth and breadth of what we do at ARC. So as you can see the main thing that we do, by law, we're conveners. It's written in law and state law that we convene. But we bring people to the table to talk about complex issues. And sometimes it's not pretty, but we are the convener, and we have a table for those types of conversations. And just excited to have you all at the table as well. And so when we talk about, say for instance, the widening of McGinnis Ferry, that has been a long conversation, but we had the DOT involved, we had Alpharetta involved, we had all these other entities involved, and now finally, we're about to see some action and some construction and some things going on. So sometimes it's not pretty, the conversations, or it's for the long haul, but we have the table to have those conversations at ARC. Just want to share this with you to really just say we have a lot of people on our board. We have a 41-member board, but I'm excited to share some good headshots there. Chairman John and Mayor Brumbelow, as well as Tom Meinhardt, are your Forsyth representatives. And Tom actually has a little bit of North Fulton as well in his district, but very excited that Forsyth has a strong presence in the ARC. And so just wanted you to know that here. And how our board members really try to talk about, that wheel I showed you with all those different things. We really try to message that as simple as we can. And so when we think about our Regions Plan, we talk about world-class infrastructure, competitive economy, healthy, livable communities. And that's really what we do in a nutshell at ARC. So we always like to show this slide because it makes the other one look very convoluted. But that's really what it's about, and that's what we are educating our board members on, and that's what you all do every day to drive the economy. And so let's talk about a little bit of the future in our Atlanta Regions Plan. Can you hear me? Okay. You have about 250,000 folks here in Forsyth, and by 2050, that is going to almost double. Let that sink in a little bit there. And if you're wondering, right, 28 years is so far away. No, it's not. Who was around with we were all around with Y2K. Remember Y2K? What were you doing? No, I just, all of us were worried and nervous, and here we are in 2022. So that's not that far away. Also, one of the things we've been doing, we're very proud of over the last 20 years, and this is in my colleague's center, for livable communities is our Livable Centers initiative. We've invested over $300 million over the past 20 years in transportation studies and infrastructure projects throughout this region. I believe the Halcyon project is an LCI recipient as well, but those applications are always open every year. You're welcome to apply. But just gives you the depth and breadth of how ARC is truly invested in the region. And many of you may know that our comprehensive economic development strategy process has started. Every 5 years, we have to update this plan, and it'll be adopted in December of this year. I believe Forsyth and the Chamber has been a part of it, but it really is about collaboration in the region to really figure out what's our strength, what's our weaknesses, our opportunities, our how we work more effectively together as a region to really be able to draw down federal funding and so many other things. And so that process is underway. For those of you that may have participated 5 years ago, it was called Catalyst. So this year we just kept the true name SEDS, so we call it SEDS. And so more to come on that. And so what we're really excited about as well when you talk about regional efforts is our regional trail network. And so much is going on throughout the region. I mean, we have Path 400, we have the Beltline, we have some work here that is happening that once done, I think it's the Green Sky, I can't remember the exact name, but once that's done, where are my bikers? I know Mike's one. Any bikers? Okay. You'll be able to bike here to Buckhead and eventually to the Beltline. Isn't that awesome? Wow. On a bike. So if you're not a biker, get a good one. But that's something that we're looking at for the future, and it's amazing. It's the Big Creek Greenway once that gets completed as well. And so I can't leave here today without, this is one of the things I'll talk about. I have a couple others, but about our region's water supply. Let me just say this, 2021 was a banner year for Georgia in water. We, can I say this? Kick butt in water. Last year, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Georgia was and is and remains good stewards of our water. Some of you may know we were being sued by Florida. We won. Go Dogs. Of course, had to get that in. Excuse me. You knew it was coming. I had to get that in somewhere. But look at this trend. I mean, over the last, 10, 20 years, we have added close to 1 million people in the region. Look at our water usage. It's declined by like 10%. We're doing good, y'all. And if you haven't participate in those toilet rebates. I'm telling you, it's going to really make a difference. As simple as changing out your toilet. It really does matter. And so we're excited about our water story, and all of the folks, even some of you here may have been around years ago when it all started, and we're just so excited. The Army Corps of Engineers they've completed and are now executing a contract where we can actually use Lake Lanier for water storage for this area, for Gwinnett, and other areas. So it really is a great story. Catherine Zitch, who heads up our water efforts, working with Mike Alexander, has just done a phenomenal job. So I had to just harp on this a bit because it really is a fascinating story. And we're happy to come back and talk to you and give you an in-depth overview of the water story. But speaking of water, let me tell you, this is the coolest project ever. Chattahoochee Riverlands. We're happy to come back and talk about this as well, but imagine, we're reimagining 100 miles of the Chattahoochee. It's amazing, where you'll have some development, but more so recreation, green space, where families can really enjoy all the hidden gems of the Chattahoochee. And it's a partnership with ARC, the Trust for Public Land, Cobb County, and the City of Atlanta. And so it is just amazing. This slide does not do it any justice, but as you can see in the map, it starts up here, and it just goes down all the way through the upper half of the state. And so we're really, really excited about reimagining what the Chattahoochee can mean for our residents, for our children, for our grandparents, etc. So it's very exciting. All right, so I gotta leave on a real note. We know that housing affordability is an issue in our region. Don't feel bad, because it's an issue across the country. And some would say it's a crisis across the country. And so the good news is that ARC and so many partners across the region are doing something about it. We're working together, we're collaborating. We've started a few years ago the Metro Atlanta Housing Strategy, which we have a website for that. I'll share that with you. But I want you to understand, and this slide actually just goes to 2019, and that's deliberate, because if we added 2020 and 2021 with the pandemic, it would be off the charts. So we wanted to have a true understanding of how the housing prices and rents were accumulating and increasing. And as you can see, if you can't see anything else, the red line is going up. That's rents over the years. The green line is wages. Now, I'm excited to hear, I believe Chair Brooks just said it, and some of the data that a lot of the companies here in Forsyth are planning to increase salaries and wages, so that's a good thing. But by and large, around the region and the country, it still is an issue. And so, as I mentioned, we have the Metro Atlanta Housing Strategy. We've sort of reviewed and came up with 10 sub-markets. Of course, this is a market, so you can go to this website, metroatlhousing.org. Strategies where each sub-market has a recommended strategy or strategies that you can look at. And the cool thing is you can look at other markets that have similar characteristics as yours. So I say all this to say that, yes, we have a bright future for our region, and very excited to have Forsyth on board. It's the table here at ARC, and we look forward to working with you for many, many years to come. Thank you so much.
You're gonna beauty before age.
I'm old. I can tell Mike's eager, so I'll be fast, right? Thank you, Dr. Wilkins. I appreciate that wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. As a reminder, we will have time for Q&A, so if you have any questions for our speakers, please scan the QR code on your table, and our virtual attendees can find the link, again, posted in the chat box on your virtual presentation. Our next speaker is Mike Alexander. Mike is the Senior Director of the ARC's Center for Livable Communities, which includes the Community Development, Natural Resources, Research and Analytics, Transportation, Access, and Mobility Services and groups of the Commission. Mike has over 20 years of public policy experience focused on regional and local community planning. As the Senior Director, he leads staff in the fields of transportation planning, environmental planning, community development, economics, and demographic forecasting. He is a graduate of the ARC Regional Institute, Leadership DeKalb, and Leadership Atlanta. Originally from South Carolina, Mike attended Auburn University, War Eagle Mike, where he received dual master's degrees in public administration and community planning. He served as a Marine infantryman in Desert Storm, and he and his wife, Michelle, and their 2 daughters live in Decatur. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mike Alexander.
That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm mic'd up. Can everybody hear me? Well, good morning. I always like to start, if I'm in Forsyth, and say, Forsyth County, because of Forsyth County, I met my wife. And I love my wife very, very much. And so anytime Forsyth calls, I honor you by honoring her. If it hadn't been for Forsyth County, I would have never met her, because she started out when she moved to this region as a planner for Forsyth County. That came down to the ARC. We met at the Chattahoochee room, and 3 years later we were married. So thank you, Forsyth County. All right, and so I had a little bit of fun with this presentation, But I'm always going to tell you that at the end, I'm going to give you a QR code, and I want you to pull out your phones at the end and download this PowerPoint, because some of the slides I'm actually going to go through pretty quickly. And that's by design and on purpose. But, you know, at the ARC, we love county ranks. So I set some of the staff loose this morning. Take just a second to look at this. And one of the questions I asked them, I don't like looking at percentage changes in population by county, because you've got small counties. You know, they add 100 people, they double their population. But if you look at counties above 100,000, Forsyth County's growth rate would make it 6th among all counties over 100,000 in population change. And really, you have been leading in population growth for over 20 years now. 20 years in really the state of Georgia. So always happy to talk to a place that's so dynamic like Forsyth. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't acknowledge the fact that last year at the U.S. national level, we had the slowest population growth we've had since the founding of the country. And so you can see that black italic quote, and I've given you all the links, so if you download this, and I know these charts are hard to see, but the simple fact is that that central chart, when you're looking at that black line going down, that is percentage change in population growth and the components associated with it. The reality is, and this is a global issue, really we are not adding people anymore almost anywhere in the developed world due to natural increase. All of our fertility rates are below replacement birth level. And what that means is, for someone like me, if 70% of the economy is based on people consuming things, and you're not adding people, well, that's going to set a marker for future growth, right? Metro Atlanta, relatively young, been very dynamic in attracting people from other places. That's been our model. That's been Forsyth's model. I'll show you a cool chart about that at the end. But again, it just means we're going to be that much more competitive in attracting, especially the best and brightest to our places. So these things, if you ask me, the best thing we can do, right, besides making sure our education system is the best in the world, is to make sure that all those other factors, the quality of life factors, and make a place attractive for future growth, are there. So when you see an image of a trail, I see economic development now. And I'll be frank with you when I say the Metro Chamber asked me a question a few weeks ago about making an animated map of all the trails that have been built in this region, because they're getting questions from prospects now about, tell me about your trail network. And I was just talking to my new buddy from Georgia Power, and he bikes over 6,000 miles a year. I bike about 1,000, so he showed me up pretty good. But this is a big part of our quality of life. So I know it sounds simplistic at times, but it's absolutely critical that we work together to build that network where I can get on a bike in Forsyth County and go all the way to Alabama, which is one of my goals. It's a long way there. I've done it. It's a long ride, but just having this interconnected network is one of those beautiful things for our quality of life that will be great for us on economic development. And of course, it goes without saying that the pandemic had us looking at numbers that I just didn't think were possible. And this is recessions charted from the month the recession began until you were back to full employment by year. So those numbers up top are the year of the recession. And of course, red is the pandemic recession. So when I saw this, and I've been using this chart for over 15 years, I knew he'd start making it again, calculated risk, and I just had never seen anything like it. We were wondering what was going to happen, but again, we have pulled off. We turned off the lights, we turned them back on, and this is maybe the best thing I could show you today, is that the strength of the American economy is going to get us out of this recession, back to full employment, hopefully by the end of the year. That's a huge point. If you think about that red line going down to under 14%, more than 14% job losses. And of course, we never want to have another 2007 Great Recession languishing all that time. And Scott's shaking his head as we were waiting for things like the housing markets to return. And we're going to talk about how the housing market has returned. And so I love this. Our staff came up with this. And I changed the title, What Are We Searching For? So if you look at what people actually plug into Google, again, What were we talking about earlier in the presentation about your own survey data? Labor shortage. I can't emphasize this enough. So look at that spike, right? But if you've been following this, you know we've had a tight labor market before the pandemic actually started. It was tough already, and everybody's like, oh, you know, pandemic, we can't find people, but it was bad before, right? And now there's just a lot of people thinking about remote work, which has really helped us a lot to weather this pandemic. But the question is, what does it mean long term? And again, you know, we're doing well, but again, a lot of people, 28%, would really struggle to handle a $400 emergency. This is just a fundamental question about economic stability at the household level, right? And that's something we've all got to be thinking about. And it still really shocks me as a citizen that if someone really did have that bill, that it would be that hard for them to pay. That's how thin their household margins really are. So we always want to keep that in our mind when we're thinking about growth. And so this got updated. This chart these numbers get revised. And so this chart got updated itself just a few days ago. And the reality is now Metro Atlanta is already back to pre-pandemic employment numbers. And that's a big, huge yay, and I need a few smiles about that, right? Because obviously we want people back to work. We want your businesses making money. And of course, our growth has mostly followed the U.S., and there's a lot of nuance here, though, if you look at those lines, right? We suffered more during the Great Recession than the United States. That was unusual. It's the first time I've really had to model or make a forecast based on actual job declines in Metro Atlanta. It just didn't really happen until then, but you see those declines and now the spike upwards in Metro Atlanta's economy. And here's the money slide, right? So how are we doing compared to other peer regions, right, coming out of this Great Recession? And this is the point. Still, this number is a little bit old, November, but you can see in comparison to the other places like New York, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Boston, we are recovering in a much faster clip than others. Austin, very strong. Our trip to study in other places, actually in Austin, because I have been watching Austin very closely. They have been leading for so long now, and a lot of the core measures of what an economy can do. Dallas, of course, Denver, but really great news for us that we've done so well recovering from this pandemic. And what sectors are we really doing well in? And of course, you can see this. Information has proven to be strong. That's great. You know, I watched information really as a sector, not adding jobs for a long time pre-pandemic in Metro Atlanta, but we've been adding those jobs in a very strong way. So that's great news as well. And of course, you know, we can't get away without adding every potential bar we can and color in the spectrum to give you as much information as possible. And again, this is staff. And at 51, I can't see it back there for once. So now I know I'm in trouble, right? But again, you're going to get to download this deck. But if you look at that in more detail, you're going to find it's really great information about how we're doing compared to other metros. And you see some of those sectors where we haven't been so strong. And obviously, this is a big question mark for us, is the in-person service economy has generally obviously struggled because of this pandemic. And Brooke was after me about inflation before I got up here. And I have a staffer, Jim Skinner. He's absolutely brilliant, but he loves to send you the news. And he sent me the Wall Street Journal article. It's not a good thing. We were number one. We were number one year-over-year inflation from December in Metro Atlanta. This was made prior to that release, but that trend still holds, right? You can see that we're experiencing inflation. It's something we take very, very seriously, and trying to read as much as I possibly can to understand what the root causes of that are. And of course, that gets you to this point where you do know transportation costs are expensive. And you know, just an anecdote. One of our other group directors' daughter wrecked her car. He tried to go buy another car, and they offered him a used car. And he said, but the used car costs more than the new car. And the dealer said, yep. And that's where we are. So used cars cost more than new cars. That's this economy, I think, summarized. And that was told to me yesterday, and I'm still chewing that down. I'm like, this is not an ideal time for a consumer to be buying a vehicle. But I do want you to keep the long view on prices. I'm currently reading the new energy map. You might want to pick that book up. It's by Daniel Yergin. It really gives you a play-by-play across the planet about what really us doubling our oil reserves has really meant for us as a country. But again, over the long term, we know fuel prices have gone up. And my daughter just changed her major to economics. Can you believe that? And so now she's coming at me. She wants to talk about the money supply. I'm like, I could not be happier as a dad, right? So she's still, and you could feel how tickled I am. She'll call me and like, oh, Dad, I just worked through this formula. I have no idea what the formulas are anymore. But I get a big kick out of it. But, you know, she's talking about fuel prices. And I'm like, well, hold up. So she and I made this chart to show you we're not really, if you're looking at the index fuel prices at record fuel levels, everybody gets into the moment. But we had much, much higher fuel prices than we have right now. So just to keep a long perspective. And to be honest with you, you know, after 21 years at the ARC, I'm going to tell you, this is one of my favorite charts. It's got everything. Everything. And so if you look at that yellow line, job openings, look at that long trend back. This is without precedent. And I swore I'd never use the word precedent again. But that yellow line is like nothing I've ever seen. Look at the red lines with the layoffs. But the critical one is that light blue, the quit rate. So when you hear people talking about the quit rate, that's what I said. This chart's got it all. It's got the quit rate. It's got the job openings. It's got the higher rate, which is flattened actually, just to show you where we really are as a nation and how tight the labor market actually is. And so everybody's making more money, but it's being offset by, I'm going to go back to old presidential administrations. You don't want to use the word, so you use the word like waffle instead of saying inflation a long, long time ago. But wages are absolutely going up now. Metro Atlanta has historically lagged behind on wage growth. We've had slides in our decks at the ARC for a long time about this, but you see those increases, but if you're comparing them to other places, we're still relatively less than some of the other large metros. And of course, the service industry, take some time to look at this in more detail because this is a critical part of the recovery since this sector is lagging. It has, you know, hospitality is the lowest paying sector of all the sectors in our economy. And so if people are trying to move up or find a better job at a higher wage, they're going to struggle the most to fill those jobs. And you can feel that they're having to pay a premium to get people to do that work, right? Shifting gears. So I wanted to give you some highlights. Everybody see the Redfin ads? Redfin ads about to win something. I forgot their phrase, but you've got these big companies now that publish an unbelievable amount of housing price data, right? And if you think about that Redfin commercial, I'm fascinated. They call it like iPurchasing or whatever, this idea you go to Redfin and buy a house, and now they're telling you, you know, you've got 5 minutes to buy a house, and how many of you have some story of like a house getting like 50 offers, right? That's how tight the housing market is. But at the end, because of these price appreciations, you know, the value of housing in the United States has doubled since the Great Recession. So there's a lot of equity built up in these houses, and I just want to take a second to think about what that means. There's a good analysis by Moody's where they were talking about before even the pandemic, the additional equity in housing was used as fundamental capital for people to start small businesses, right? That it gave them that economic opportunity to light off and do their own thing. But the real story for us is we just haven't been building like we used to. We just haven't been building like we used to. And I have been waiting a long time for these numbers to go back up. And so it used to be this cyclical pattern of for sale inventory, right? Near Christmas, it would get really at its low point and it'd pick up in the spring. And you can feel that, right? Year over year. Well, look at that long line. Hasn't come back. And so as a result, our home prices continue to grow in a real way. And then rents, I like to keep this in. Look at that blue semicircle, that 41, that actually our rent prices now are really starting to lead in percentage terms the nation. Still relatively affordable, but not really, not if you're a low income or a middle income household. I mean, some of you are looking at that rent price and saying, my mortgage is less than that, right? And so this is tough stuff. And so, not a fancy chart made by us, but maybe the best find I've found in quite a long time to explain what's been happening. So if you think about building permit starts per million people, United States by decade. Does everybody get this? Right? Coming out of the Great Recession, we just didn't build the housing we need. And so my simple solution, and I've spent a lot of time on that housing strategy we're so proud of, is to build more housing everywhere we can. We absolutely need it, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about that on the demographic side. So what's coming next, real quickly, and I want to get to some Forsyth-specific information, because that's what interests me the most, is that, you know, we're spending a lot more as consumers, but we haven't been doing it in person. We haven't been doing it in person, and this is incredible big data that's been summarized by Raj Chetty out of Harvard's group. So the other fundamental fact is, you know, I've said this joke for years. My daughter that's going to major in economics now, I used to tell them, and I'll tell you, you know, there's really three things I wanted them to be. I wanted them to be a JavaScript programmer that was a registered nurse that liked to drive a truck. And then they'd be off the Alexander Dolphin. You'd have a job forever in this economy, right? There's an almost unlimited demand for software developers in the United States, and generally speaking, in all of the developed countries. But in particular, Metro Atlanta has been doing quite well on this. Georgia Tech and our other universities are fundamental to a lot of economic activity. And up in this part of the world, too, there are a lot of companies whose names I can't pronounce, and I couldn't tell you what they're doing, but they're making a lot of money. Right? And that's the part of this software story that I think is so important. You know, I was listening to the news last night. We're going to need 250,000 nurses, I think, in the next 20 years to help take care of us as the baby boomers really get into old age, and then Generation X, and you can see me, I got a cane now, are going to need that additional health care. But this is what's driving the economy. Can we create an education pipeline that fits this demand? All right. Some fun slides, and we'll get to it. Malika gave you some of the big numbers, very simply, beautifully, as strategic relations does. I'm giving you the exact opposite. I'm giving you the actual dashboard where we put these numbers up, because Mike Alexander likes a dashboard. For me, everything should look like an old B-52 cockpit. If you've ever seen a B-52 cockpit, I'm going to see every measure I can in a way that's very quick for me to see it. But you're going to see on the employment side, we expect Forsyth County to be very strong. Fulton is our employment spine. You know, if you think about it that way and you go from North Fulton all the way down, you'll think about all the big employment centers. But Forsyth is bending the arc of employment growth for a suburban county. That's critical for us to watch over the long term, because we do almost expect you to redouble your population by 2050. So this job growth, very much based in supporting the people that will be here, but also hopefully more people living here, working here in sectors that are really outputting their economic activity. And of course, population growth, you know this all too well. Look at Forsyth and those ranks. If you think about it, and here's the critical point and the reason I kept this in, if these forecasts continue to be relevant and accurate, you would expect Forsyth County really to become, somebody count it off for me, Scott, fifth, fourth. Okay, Scott said it's 5. And that's the point, right? You are going to become one of the central counties in our economic identity of this region over the next 30 years. And that's why we're up here today. That's why we're excited to be up here today, because we want to make sure that you grow as much as possible in a way that's healthy for Forsyth County. And so I like to think a lot about age. This is how I make data for myself. I color code it. There's some great points here, right? So if you look at that 0 to 4, and you look at that percentage as a share of Forsyth's total population base, that's 6.81, and Cumming actually has a higher share And then just for a second, contrast that with the United States. And I know this sounds like I'm down in the weeds, but in just a few seconds, you can see a pattern, right? Look at North Fulton. North Fulton share of kids, young kids is less. They've got the teenagers, and they've got lots of people in their 40s and 50s like me who have raised those kids. And Forsyth's a little behind that time history of population aging, right? Generally younger, comparatively. And then just to acknowledge, if you look further out at the United States, when we talk about the millennials, right, and how important they are, look at those shares of them in the U.S. economy. When you hear the millennials are the largest demographic group really in the United States, that's that red line across showing you that absolutely so clearly. So this pattern is going to have an impact on all the things that you do. And of course, we finally got a market insight license. I'm really excited about this commercial data, so I get to show you this chart, which I think is awesome. But what it really shows you is their formula for determining what the deficits are on the housing supply. I told you I'd get down to Forsyth level data. And on that high-end side, really the resale market, there is so much demand for housing that you just can't meet because the houses aren't up for sale. Which brings me back to my other point. We need to build more housing. Can everybody say it with me? Build more housing, right? And so this is incredible big data that he pulls all this together, every county in the metro area, but just to show you really across all these price points, there are a lot of people that would like to buy houses in Forsyth County, and they're having a hard time doing it. And this is the chart I was talking about that I really love. And so we just got access to this as well. They updated this tool. I hope you look at this in more detail. And again, I can't see it anymore. I'm going to look back. But those blue lines are people moving to Forsyth County. I love this. So we're getting a lot more detail in real time about who's moving in, and the reds are moving out. So your big relationship is obviously with Fulton County, right? People move in from Fulton County, some move back to Fulton County. But there's some nuance here that I think is really interesting. There's enough movement out of Forsyth that Maricopa County, Arizona hits this list. I was like, are you kidding me? So a lot of fun to think about that. Does anybody know anybody that moved to Maricopa? That's my question I'd want to put into the blog to the audience today. Who's moving to Maricopa? It's hot. They got no trees, man. And then on the other side, Broward County. Broward County is a huge county. We can't forget that. Moving to Forsyth County. So you're pulling some people from Florida into Forsyth County. I know I'm having a little bit of fun with this, but these patterns matter, right? What's happening, because they impact all this other stuff. And again, Forsyth County's employment, in that dark gray shaded area, you've been outperforming the U.S. And Georgia, really over this time series of 10 years, got hit like the Great Recession, and now you are strong, right? You've really been strong. So 85,000 jobs, and of course, 9.8%. That region is actually Forsyth County, and this is the most recent data we have on your employment trends that I think are reasonable. So, Forsyth's doing great on that. And then new data again, reformatted just to show you. And I like to do it this way. Like the number one sector I'm trying to fill positions in Forsyth County is actually healthcare, right? And then retail trade. And then you get into the administrative and professional work. And then professional, scientific, and technical services, the one I'm always going to be following as close as I possibly can, right? Because those are very high-paying jobs. Those are engineers, those are accountants. That's the backbone of the Metro Atlanta business economy. So it's up there. And so if you're looking at occupation, registered nurses. Now what you don't see here is software developers, really, right? So take just a second to look at that. This tool calls the web every few minutes to look for every potential job posting and then sorts it, and we can summarize it for you. And I've got a funny in here because it thinks in terms of zip codes, right? So think in terms of zip codes. Who sees something that they're like, what? Fulton County Schools down at the bottom. So you run these big data tools, and you'll see that. Don't discount it. It's just the fact that, when it's thinking about zip code overlap, it does that. But of course, Forsyth County schools, fast population growth, it makes sense, right? They need a lot of teachers to educate that almost regional highest share of 0 to 4, right? So this is a big part of it. Northside, obviously, hiring a lot of people as well. But really, I think great data for you to understand who's looking for people in Forsyth County. And then, again, I know it's color-coded, and I know it's detailed, but there's a lot of great information here. So if you look back over 10 years, what's been the employment growth? And then going forward 10 years, what do we really expect to happen? So I'm going to look back for a second just to give you some more detail on this. There are only 300 unclassified jobs in Forsyth County, but that's a very high location quotient. Does everybody know what a location quotient is? Just means you have more of a share of those jobs than the national average, right? So if you mirrored the U.S., the location quotient would be 1. So this is a quick, easy measure for us just to understand where your economy is strong. And so wholesale trade, good paying jobs, very, very strong. You got a location quotient of 1.57 in that sector. And then construction. So I went to fuel up this morning at the racetrack down the street. Lots of construction, landscape, trucks, getting ready to go out, right? Construction's going to be strong here because there's a lot of economic growth here, and construction follows the places that have the strongest economic growth potential, especially in the housing market. So you see that as well. But then you didn't see information listed, but information employment is a very strong, and didn't see information listed in the Burning Glass data about jobs postings. But again, this is a good thing. You see information popping up in these employment numbers as a strong location quotient, adding over really 1,300 jobs in the previous 10 years. And of course, the pandemic had a big impact on that. And then going forward, if you see this, again, healthcare is expected to be the strong sector, and that's just a function of the demand with an aging population. But there's a lot of goodness here, especially with those location quotients like information, that really make me optimistic about what Forsyth's future is going to be. And again, as you're working on this economic development side, adding more diversity through the employment base and businesses that are here, like you're doing in this way today, being here with us, we couldn't be cheering you on more because, again, we want to see people that don't have to make the supercommute. You want people being able to work and live relatively close together. Metro Atlanta historically has been very affordable on housing until this last period. Where we've always been expensive is when you add housing costs and transportation costs together, right? And so finding that balance of putting housing where the jobs are and vice versa is a critical planning challenge for us and something we think a lot about. And so you're working through that every day in the planning work that the County Commission works on daily. And then meeting that with all this infrastructure work that Malika talked about that we do help coordinate in our own way at the ARC that we're very proud of, is helping to meet this opportunity for you. So I didn't do the key points at the beginning because I didn't want to take up too much time. But again, you'll see just literally what we think in the simplest way possible. Takes just a second to think about that, scroll through that. Again, I don't want you to forget these demographic things I'm talking about with population growth. They're global. And to give you a context of how global, China really, by the end of 2100, the year 2100, population will have declined by 700 million people. So we are not alone, and that's a critical point for us when we're thinking about this. And we're going to have to think about attracting talent to this region as a fundamental long-term strategy for us. Now, there are a lot of other slides in this deck as well. This is that moment. Please pull out your phone. It shows me you care. And point it at that QR code. Don't take a picture, just point it, and then click on the link. And hopefully you'll be able to download this deck so that it reduces our email callback at the ARC. But finally, I want to say, if you call, we will be up here. We're already investing in some stuff up at McFarland to try to help make sure you're prepared for all the things that are going to happen up at 400. I'm excited about that. We are a resource for you, and that's why I put those links up there. Jim Jaquish is here. He does a lot of work with you on governmental relations. Malika's crew, strategic relations, you're going to find they're going to be everywhere trying to make sure we understand what your needs are. And then you'll be working with my center as well, the Center for Livable Communities. And again, if you have a data question, bring it. That's what we're here for. We want to be a resource for you, especially if it helps you to grow your business. That's my favorite thing in the world, right? And that's what I talk most to my daughter about, is just growing the economy to make sure we're strong as we possibly can be. So with that, I think we're going to take some questions and all that. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Dr. Wilkins, can we get you back up here? We've got I brought this out of my living room. Hopefully it's comfortable. So we're going to take a minute to do some Q&A. If you have questions, there's cards on your table. Fill one of those out, hold it up, somebody will come get it. And if you're virtual, there's a link in the chat that you can submit questions to. So we've got some pre-submitted questions also that I'll get to, but I think I want to lead with this one because you just got finished talking about it. So it says, explain the long-term need for increased housing needs in view of the that made sense to me the first time I read it. Is that inventory? Or negative population trend? Declining. Okay, I'm going to read it again. Explain the long-term need for increased housing needs in view of the declining population trend.
That's a great question. And if I could back up for for just a second. I was a zoning administrator in Clayton County in the 1990s. I'm a land use planner actually by training. And I used to have to cite people for parking their semi-trucks in residential areas. And again, you know, it was one of those tough things where we had to spend a lot of time thinking about how to get people to see that it was too much. Housing in particular locations becomes obsolete. There's a natural turnover in the housing that you may or may not realize. And if you were in the city of Atlanta looking around, especially on the west side, you'd see a lot of functionally obsolete housing. And given that those demographic age characteristics that I already talked about, what we're really seeing is you've got a generation, the Millennials, who are almost at peak buying period, but the supply really isn't there for them, right? Because we haven't added to that supply. When you're thinking about people living longer, right? And the example I use is East Cobb. When the baby boomers moved to the East Cobb in the 1970s, that was relatively proximate to the major employment centers that were active at that time. A millennial today doesn't have the same option, right? And if you look at Fayette County, where you've got a lot of aging in place, that turnover in the housing stock just isn't there, right? And so one of the biggest functions of this over the long term has been declines, and I know this is a little wonky, in household size itself, right? The sticky point for me is always almost 50% of the households in the city of Atlanta, as an example, are one-person households. So when you put all that math together, you really haven't added a supply that recognizes the changes in the way households form and, of course, where they're living and what type of housing they actually have. There are lots of places in the United States still that have been slow growth where you can absolutely go buy a house and it's affordable. This is not this place. To be honest with you, the core of this region, and I think really the prices are similar here, the sales price per square foot. My example is Cabbagetown, if you know where that is, in downtown Atlanta. First in-town house I bought was in Cabbagetown. The price per square foot, and this is some of our big data work in Cabbagetown, is more than Buckhead, right? And so those price pressures have really manipulated the way people think about the markets. And you see this across the board, that the number of census tracts now where the median sales price is over $500,000 has really almost quadrupled over the last 10 years. So again, if you're a millennial and maybe you're not wanting to buy a $700,000 house,
Right.
it's a tough market for you. And so, given that new home production has been so much less over time, it just all factors into this real issue we have with not enough supply at the right price points. And, that's why I'd say at this point, just build more housing and hopefully the prices will cascade in a way that benefit everyone.
And I would just say that conversation that Mike is saying is really nuanced too, because if you're not from the metro area, say for instance you're coming from New York or Los Angeles, our prices look darn good, right? They look great. And so when you have the charts as he showed where, Atlanta Metro has, decent affordability, that's really nuanced to other areas that are coming into our region. But for the folks that live here, like you said, the
That's a great
millennials,
point.
the inventory, as we know, is low, and then the houses that we do have, you just can't afford. And so, I think we have to think about that picture as well, because if you're coming from another region that has, for us, that's very high, but, for them, it's pretty affordable. And so there's so many nuances. I just wanted to share that piece with you.
Thank you. Look, I'm not the fastest guy in the room, but I just realized with this last question, somebody's rewriting these. I was like, same person asking all these questions, this is the same handwriting. So thank y'all for making it where I can read it. I appreciate that. I was going to just invite whoever it was up on the stage and just have a conversation. So anyhow, all right, so I wanted to get to that one before, but I like this one here. Imagine a business owner that may not really know what the ARC does. How would you describe to that business owner what the ARC is?
Either one of us. I'll start. Well, let me just help you all. First, we do say ARC, not
Okay,
ARC.
all right, no more ARC. Noted.
I thought I should share that. So we say ARC, but we certainly will answer to ARC at any time. But, with
Northern ARC.
the North, right? For a business owner, we're so many things, or for a new business owner, as Mike shared with you and said earlier about just a plethora of data. Our research and analytics team, I would put them up against any research team in the country. We have so much information for business owners to help them get off their feet, to help them, their businesses thrive. And we know the region. So as you look at developing your business plans, or, you want to expound on your business or expand on your business, everything from transportation to education to aging services to workforce, we have the information to really help you sort of broaden those areas. And so we're an open book. As Mike said, anytime you need information, it's free. We'll get it to you. There's no cost, if you will. But we are just a wealth of information, and we are truly invested in our communities, which is the business community, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, and I'll just lift up and say, think about like the economic ecosystem of this region and how the public sector and the private sector actually work together in ways that we don't often consciously think about. For me, it always begins with transportation infrastructure, right? And doing that in the best way possible. The legislature, I think, has done a good job of trying to make sure our revenue and money we're able to invest through local SPOS, and of course, the way the state funds it as well. And again, attracting and getting that share that's so important to us at the ARC of federal dollars, putting that all together. I like to feel good knowing that, now giving all those revenue streams that we have, especially at the local level, because I'll be honest with you, the local governments spend more in this state on that type of infrastructure now than individually the state or the federal government. But putting that all together is obviously good business, right? Mm-hmm. So as much as we possibly can. Like the 400 work, which is, obviously, while we're under construction, going to be a challenge for people experiencing those longer travel times. Over the long term, I mean, what else can I say? Us helping to coordinate, plan, and make sure all that money flows. It's not shiny, but it is critical. right? And again, similarly, in the environmental planning work, we've been protecting through an act called MERPA, Metropolitan River Protection Act. We have been protecting the Chattahoochee River now for over 50 years, right? And so that protection, combined with a lot of stuff we do through the North Georgia Metropolitan Water Planning District, really has put us in a place now that we just signed water supply contracts, right, in the process up here at Lake Lanier. Our long-term water supply is as secure as it's ever been. We've done such a good job that when really Florida sued us this last time, it went to the Supreme Court, they actually said a municipal water supply is no longer an issue in this lawsuit. Florida said that. And what that means is they were talking about Metro Atlanta. So when she puts up that conservation slide for water, that's a heck of a lot of work on our part to coordinate with the local governments to make sure when we get sued, we can say, we've got and have done so much to preserve our water supply, protect our water supply, cut consumption, that we've come out of these cases in really the best way possible. Again, lifting up and thinking about this ecosystem. So what does that mean? It's good for business, right? Our water costs are relatively expensive, but now we know it's secure. And to be honest with you, late last night watching the Olympics, I was looking at the new demand forecast for the water supply. That's why it's top of mind for me. And knowing that we've got enough in those forecasts over the long term, again, I'll say it one more time, not shiny to look at total wastewater treatment capacity over the long term and water supply capacity, but they're there, and that's good planning work the ARC does, coordinating with all the local governments in these water basins that really don't in a day-to-day way impact business, but over the long term make sure your businesses are going to have that core infrastructure to do what you need to do.
And I just want to add, so Mike said something really interesting even earlier in his presentation about transportation. I mean, I believe we still have about 77 or 79% of folks that drive to work by themselves in the metro area. And so talk about businesses, something that we offer. I got to put a plug in for Georgia Commute Options, which is managed under Mike's Center, but we manage a program on behalf of the DOT here, and it helps companies figure out ways to give incentives to their employees to stop driving by themselves. So whether it's carpooling or whether it's working from home, biking, walking, ride sharing, et cetera, that is something that we also help businesses with as they're thinking about transportation being sort of a sore spot to get people to those job centers.
Awesome. Okay, so got a couple different kind of, so mixed-use developments like Halcyon and the new Cummins City Center are very popular now. Is there a population threshold for success for these, or a life, hang on, I can't read. Is there a population threshold for success for these, or a life for planning purposes?
What, a live for planning purposes?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm reading it right. Is there a population
Somebody
threshold?
want to own up on that one and maybe clarify? Because I do want to answer it.
Yeah. Anybody want to clarify?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have an exact answer on that. At 51, after a hip replacement, I try to be honest in saying I have the courage to say I'm not sure exactly, which is a little better than I don't know, but not much. But it is something that we absolutely think about, especially on transportation infrastructure. We're thinking about how many people need to be in an area, over an area, to get the numbers you need to make it all work. The reality is, you know, if you go down to Serenbe has a disproportionate number of restaurants. You know, Serenbe down in South Fulton, right? It attracts people to drive a relatively long distance to go to that high amenity place. Avalon, for me, was a big reset, right? Avalon, I think, generally started a little slow. Now it's on fire. It's kind of this modern footprint on this. The bigger picture, I think, is the nature of retail, I think, is changing. And we're trying to pay attention to that. Actually, if you download the deck, you're going to see I've got slides in there on vacancy rates for retail, industrial, and office for Forsyth County. We just didn't have time for it today, and they're all below market on that as well. But, you know, these developments follow income. Scott would tell you this 10 ways from Sunday. And so, generally, it's number of households by income, and a simple radius is the way I've seen most of that research. Not something we deal with directly at the ARC. The bigger picture, again, though, is people are looking for these types of amenities. So when Malika put up that LCI study slide, I started at the ARC over 20 years ago when we kicked that program off. And if you go to places like Woodstock or even Cumming, across the region, you're going to be in an LCI community now. And the value system of that really is, make it higher amenity, make it more walkable, make it less dependent on the single occupancy vehicle. And the success of that really is without peer as a program to help communities in particular create those spaces where that business activity is going to be at a high level. So I'm very, very, very proud of that additional transportation infrastructure we've been able to put into those places. Again, marrying the infrastructure with the land use pattern to make sure we're doing as much as we can to grow that economy. Not a great answer to your question, Malika. I don't know if you want to add to that, but it's what we think most about, truthfully, day-to-day and comprehensive planning and community development is how to make communities better places. And the business impacts of that, I think you will feel, and you can always email us and say, I'm here, what did y'all do? And I'll be able to send you via a couple dashboards we have exactly what we've done in those communities, try to help them be the best places they can be.
I think you answered that as well as I asked it. I mean, better than I asked it. So it's kind of refreshing that you used a term that doesn't get used. No. You did better than I did. You used a term that I don't hear a lot these days, and it's I don't know.
Man, you got to have courage to say it in this world.
It's refreshing. I love it. I pre-read this one.
You can do this. We already have it work for you.
Why do you think the recession will recover by the end of the year? And please be specific.
Oh, I can be specific because I read MoodysEconomy.com's latest report. And they release it every week, this week in the economy. So, yeah, that's specifically from Moody's because I do lean on them intellectually a lot to kind of summarize what's happening in particular at the national level. And that's really their forecast that we'll get back to pre-recession employment positivity by the end of the year. Now, if I'm being honest, there's some big headwinds on this, right? Mm-hmm. Acknowledging inflation, there's a lot of work that's going to happen at the national level. Getting back, and I was hoping this would happen, to what my daughter's been coming at me about, the money supply, and how we're going to figure that out in a way to get inflation under control is maybe the undeterminate thing that will be something I'm sure all of you will be following closely month over month to make sure that they're hitting those targets so that we get that inflation under control.
And I would say, yes, it will recover, but not without some conscious change from our companies and communities and governments. When you think about office space, as Mike mentioned earlier, reimagining that space. I mean, I don't know if a lot of our companies have gone back to a hybrid work scenario where they're teleworking and working from home and working in the office. Many of our companies in the region are just not doing the 5-day in office. I don't know every single day. Some are, some of you are, but many are not. And so it will come with us sort of reimagining our workspace, and how do we get things done. And so I think that's something critical to say as well. And then when I looked at this spring, and it probably has skyrocketed since then, but I think it was like April and May, 400,000 to 700,000 or million people quit their job. I was looking at Mike's chart earlier on the quit rate. People are now just, saying to themselves, I just don't want to do this anymore, for whatever reason. It's not forced or anything. And so we have to factor in those sort of real life realities as we think about the recovery long term.
All right, I got good news for y'all. This is the last question. All right, so with our population expected to nearly double, but unemployment growth not nearly at the same rate, where will the tax revenue come from to support this growth? And as a secondary little thing here, it says housing is a drain, not a contributor to our tax deficit, correct?
Correct. That's who wrote that question? Come on. Yeah, you know, I'll be honest for a second. I live down in Decatur, and Decatur has pulled me into a lot of meetings to think about what it meant to have their student enrollment double in 10 years. In a small city school system, it put an unbelievable amount of pressure on them to figure that out. Single-family housing without balanced commercial growth really does put your tax base in a place where, depending on the home prices, and that's only, give me a little space on that one, you know, when does a home really start to pay for itself? This is very much a slippery slope, though, right? If you go down that path, eventually you're going to be like, all right, we just don't need any more people either, right? Because you want to make sure if you get a mindset where everybody pays their own share all the time. That's to say you got to think again, you got to back up and think about over the lifetime of a household, right? So both of our daughters now are out of high school, but we continue to live in Decatur, and we continue to pay the highest property taxes in the state. So now it's actually paying off for them that I've decided to stay in that house because I love my community so much. So it's a cycle of housing, cycle of household composition in a community that really does matter. But I don't want to be absolutely frank and say, yeah, we love it when local governments figure out that commercial base that includes the office and all the other revenue as well, because the highest revenue you're going to get on your property taxes for commercial is just the other question we were talking about, the value per square foot for these high amenity places like the Avalons and the Halcyons and the Vickeries is going to be one of the offsets for you, and you got to keep your eyes on that. Recognizing again, though, that you need affordable housing too. You've got to think about all the people that aren't making the big bucks and what it means to them in your community as well. But that's a great fundamental question. I thank you for asking it, because that's a tough question.
All right. Well, listen, Mike and Malika, thank you all very much for coming. Thanks to all our sponsors. Let's give them all a round of applause. And for those of you who are not Rotarians, you may not be familiar with the four-way test, but Rotarians end every meeting with the four-way test. Do we have that for the screen? Yeah, there we go. So let's stand and recite the four-way test and adjourn. The four-way test are the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.